Welcome back to this second episode of PHP Fundamentals. I hope you enjoyed the first episode. In this episode, we're going to talk about basic syntax of PHP and how to better integrate it within HTML. What do we mean by syntax? Well, syntax are the rules of how to properly write a language. And PHP borrows some of its syntax from languages like C and Perl, like curly braces, for example, to enclose blocks of code, and dollar signs for variables, which you don't see almost anywhere else. Those come from Perl. All right, so let's take a look at this file right here. It's called, the title is PHP syntax, and let's see how this looks on the browser. All right, so we have everything that we need to have sent by the server has to be within an opening PHP tag, which looks like this, and a closing PHP tag. Everything inside here will be parsed by the interpreter and sent back to the browser. So we have this file with 4 echo statements. The first 3, and like in the episode before, have HTML included in them, and the 4th one is just a plain sentence. Now, so far so good, everything looks good. Let's add one more echo statement, and this time we're gonna add it outside the PHP tags. Hello again. Let's save it and let's run it and let's see what happens. What do we have here? What we intended to do is add one more line that said hello again, but what do we have? We have this echo space double quote on the first line. We have hello again on the second line, and we have another double quote and a semicolon on the third line. Now, why did this happen? Well, what happened was that the interpreter stopped the PHP that is sent to the browser right here after 35 seconds period, right? Now the browser, the interpreter didn't touch this at all because it is outside of the PHP tags. So the browser took over, and what it did was it added this part to the last line right here. It then found an H1 tag, which is a block level tag, and as you know, it has its own line. So we have a second line here. And then finally, after the H1 tag, we have these 2 characters, a double quote and a semicolon, which went to the third line. So this seemingly innocent line has caused a 3-line disaster here in our browser. So how do we fix it? Well, simply move this below here, save the file, refresh, and now we have everything okay again. So the first rule of PHP syntax is that everything that should be parsed by the PHP interpreter has to be in between the opening PHP tag and the closing PHP tag. We're going to talk about comments now. Let's open a second file. And actually, we're going to move this like this so that we can better see it. Okay, what do we use comments for? Well, comments are used for a couple of reasons. mainly to give yourself notes about the code that you're writing. It is more common that you think to go back to your code a few months after you've written it and you have no idea what it does. So, a well-placed comment, concise, will go a long way in helping you figure out what you've written before. And it's even more important for other developers, including yourself, when you are looking at other people's code. If there's no comments in them, unless the code is very simple, in this case, because we are beginning to learn PHP, the files that we're using are simple. But as the code grows complex, you will definitely need some sort of assistance, and comments go a long way in helping you in that way. All right, so let's take a look at how to add comments in PHP. There are 3 different ways to add comments in PHP, and they are borrowed from previous programming languages. We have C-style comments, we have C++ style comments, and finally we have Perl style comments, and we're going to take a look at those. Looking at this file right here, this is the first way that you can write comments, and this way is common when you want to write multi-line comments. So we are commenting this line right here, which says hello world. And we're using a long sentence, so there's a couple of lines, and so we use this C-style comments. The tradition of course of writing your first program in a new language and outputting hello world to the screen goes back to 1972. This is the same style of comment, C style, taking only one line, so you can do this as well. The second and third style of comments are 2 forward slashes and the pound key, and this will take your comment to the end of the line. And you can also start this style of comments in its own line. Now we're going to talk about case sensitivity in PHP, another part of the syntax, how to properly write a language. Let's open a new file. Let's open it here also in the editor, case sensitivity. And we have, in the first part of our code, now remember that everything that is written in PHP must be inside the opening and closing PHP tags. You can see what happens when you forget to do that. Now we have 3 variables here. The one starts with the $, as all variables do, and they all look very similar. The word car written in all lowercase, all uppercase, and the first letter uppercase. If we put the values, these values in these variables, what happens? Well, what happens is that we create 3 different variables, because variables in PHP are not case sensitive. So if you have all uppercase or all lowercase, that means you will have 2 different variables. In this case, we're creating 3 different variables. If they were the same variable, right? So if case sensitivity didn't matter, then they all would output to the screen Toyota Sienna, because this is the last value that was given to the variables. But as we can see, they all have different values. Now let's take a look at statements in PHP. Here we're writing 3 different echo statements, and we output this to the screen, and this is the result here. First one is I'm not case sensitive. This is also valid code, And yet another way to use echo. This is just a single statement that is provided by PHP. You can write it in any different way. That doesn't mean it's a good idea. In fact, this example that we have here is a good example of how not to write variables. Your variables should be as different from one another as you can have them. This can create problems. It can be, very confusing, very easy to confuse one for the other. And as far as the echo statements, there are usually language conventions that programmers use industry-wide, in which, in the case of PHP, for example, the echo statement is usually written all lowercase. Now this works, and this works as well. But as you can see, the code editor here only highlights the first way that we're writing, basically telling you, hey, wait a minute, this shouldn't be done this way. So if we change it to echo, you can see that it's highlighted. And let's do the same here. Now the code editor is telling you, all right, that's a better way of doing it. Save the file, refresh here, and nothing changes. So both ways are actually valid, but it is usually best practices to write it in all lowercase, to write PHP statements in all lowercase. Let's talk about the different ways in which we can add PHP to our HTML file. You've seen that the first one, you add all the code inside a block of opening, an opening PHP tag and a closing PHP tag. Let's look at another file now. Let's look at the source code. And let's take a look at this. We have a block of code here between an opening PHP tag and a closing PHP tag. We are using two echo statements. And this is the first way that we can add PHP to a file, but you can also do it in line. See, for example, in line 12 here, we have a P tag. Within this P tag, we have our PHP. But once again, you have to remember that if this is going to be PHP, if this is going to be sent by the server to the browser as plain HTML, it has to be inside an opening tag and a closing tag. If we change any of this, it breaks. Let's see if we take out the closing tag, what happens? We have an error. All right, let's go back and fix it the way it was, save, and now everything works fine. So remember, PHP opening tag, PHP closing tag, it can be done in a single block of code. It can be done inline as well. As long as it has both tags, things will work fine. We're now going to talk about statement separation in PHP. What do we mean by that? How does PHP, how does the interpreter know when a sentence ends and another begins? Let's take a look at some code. Let's take a look at this one. Case sensitivity. Every statement that is written in PHP ends with a semicolon. Let's get rid of one, save, refresh, and we have an error. So let's go back here, refresh again, everything works fine. This is done for PHP, for the interpreter to know when a sentence begins and where it ends. So every semicolon that the interpreter finds will mean to it that a new sentence will begin next. And the way we write it here is this is only for us to know that in a new line a new sentence begins. It could be just as well be written this way. Put all three sentences in the same line, three statements in the same line. Let's see if we save, refresh. It's all the same. Nothing changes. But this would be much harder for a person to read. The interpreter couldn't care less. As long as it finds a semicolon, everything works fine. So that's another syntax rule that the interpreter works with, having a semicolon at the end of each sentence. Otherwise, it doesn't know where one sentence begins, where a statement begins, and another one ends. And that's it for this second episode. I hope you liked it. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.